And we're live.
Okay, welcome everyone. I think people are still joining, but I believe we can start now. Welcome everyone to this amazing session that I'm very excited about. My name is Ukwori, and I'm a communications consultant and a member of IABC, and I am excited to moderate this session. I have two amazing people with me today, and I'll let them introduce themselves, Andras and Philippe. And Andras, you can go first and just introduce yourself. Then I will, give the participants the objectives and house rules. Then we start this conversation today.
Yes, thank you, Ukwori, and greetings for all who are attending the conference. I'm Andras Staniszlav. I'm Hungarian, so hence my strange name. I'm based in Hungary at the moment, but before the pandemic, I lived both in Hungary and in the United Kingdom. So I lived a life in both countries. I'm a strategic communication consultant, meaning that I mainly advise clients on reputation, stakeholder management, and focusing on all different topics from sustainability to government relations, measurement, internal communications, and everything. I studied as a journalist, so I have that background in media economics as well. But then I learned the strategic side of the communication and not the daily practice. And then I joined the CIPR when I moved to the United Kingdom. Basically, not only because of I knew too much about the CIPR, but I just wanted to belong to a community. And it happened to be a great community because I'm the member for over 7 years now, I guess. And now I'm the chair of the international group. So I'm the chair of CIPR International. Besides that, I'm the president of the Hungarian PR Association. I run a small consultancy called Vitelefon Digital, and also a strategic communication consultancy called Personal. So that's basically my background. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity and thanks for the invitation. Go back to Ukwori.
Thank you, Andras. Philippe?
Oh, is it my turn? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Philippe Borremans, again, a strange family name. That's typical Belgian for you. That used to be my country of origin, but I had the immense pleasure of living on your beautiful continent for several years and working there as well for several years. So this is always a great opportunity to connect again with Africa and the communication professionals. My background is public relations. That's what I've studied. Worked for IBM 10 years, then 6 years as a chief social media officer for an international group. And apart from currently being the volunteer president for the International Public Relations Association, during the normal daytime, I work as an emergency risk communication consultant, currently on a 10-month mission for the WHO. And I mentioned I worked in West Africa. Again, that was in the context of fighting epidemics and pandemics. So that's my specialty. Very happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So just to set the stage in terms of letting everyone know why we're here. So the objective of this session or this panel really is to discuss the importance of PR and communications as a profession, how we put this on the map as a profession, and importance of ethics, PR associations. You've heard from our panelists, their background, so they're very, very important to this discussion today. And activities like, awards and credentials that help to raise the profile of PR and communications in Africa. So I'm really happy that both of you are here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. So just to set the stage a little bit, if I would ask both of you this question to start with. When we talk about professionalizing PR and communication, what does this exactly mean? So everyone has a very good understanding and we're working on the same basis as we're having this conversation. Philippe, you can go first.
For me, professionalizing, it's different dimensions, right? It's how do you keep the profession active, and also as a professional, how do you keep being professional, meaning continuous investment in training, education on different levels. But as president of IPRA, and I think our colleagues at the CIPR don't think differently, it's also about looking at making sure that the people who consider themselves being part of our global family of public relations professionals or communicators are up to standard, and that we do accept them in our family. But there are a couple of things, and you already mentioned one, and I think it's a fundamental one, that's our ethical code. And so I think that's about the discussion. I think that at least that's what comes to my mind when we talk about the being a professional communicator or public relations professional.
Andras, do you have something to add?
Yeah, when I just heard your question, I immediately wanted to re-question something. Do we have a real definition of whether public relations is a profession or industry or a practice? So I think that there is no like a global definition of what professionalism means. To me, I think it's like 4 or 5 different things. One, and probably most important for me personally, is the credibility and the authenticity. So without that, without the authenticity, a professional cannot be professional. So I think that's the first one. The second one is with what you mentioned, but also Philippe mentioned as well, is the ethical standards and the ethical behavior. Then I would say the best use of tools and technologies available. So I think that's also part of the professionalism, is that you know what are the tools out there. Philippe has great experience because he has a PR tool newsletter as well. So he's focusing on that as well. But the way you use it also is part of the professionalism. And I think the next, to me, is the art of listening and understanding. Because I think PR professionals sometimes forget how important it is to understand our environment, our circumstances, and all the stakeholders. So without that being in your focus, you're not professional at all. And there is one more thing, which is kind of funny, but I think it's very important for me. And it's just something I've realized throughout the pandemic, like last 12, 14 months, is the right to fail. And to me, it's also very important for being a professional that if I do something wrong, that I can admit, I can tell all my stakeholders, even my colleagues, my clients, that I did some mistake, be them technical, like your child is just running behind you during a conference call, but also if you do something, if you from the tension, from because of your mental health state, you do something or you say something wrong to your audience, then you can say sorry. And I think that is something we learned throughout the pandemic, 14 months. But that's also a key part of being professional, I guess.
Thank you for that. And just based off of that answer from both of you, Andras, so why do you think it's important for us to improve this body of knowledge, kind of work on the ethical standards, and also certification of PR and communication professionals?
Honestly, I will have 2 answers, a professional one and a personal one. I think that the technology issue and the new knowledge is very key for professionalism. So the lifelong learning, and in all different ways. So for example, CIPR has, I don't know, 5 or 6 ways of learning and training opportunities. One is the university courses. One is the training courses, which I think 4 or 5 of them are accredited by CIPR, which are based in in Africa. So they provide CIPR qualifications. So that's also part of the services we offer. There are trainings, and since the pandemic, all trainings are available online as well. So everyone from anywhere in the world can join the trainings. The CPD, which is slightly unique to this profession, is the lifelong learning opportunity with basically, I think, thousands of great materials. And also CIPR International, our group, has lots of free stuff, free materials, like the webinars, the recordings, so they are available on demand as well. But my personal answer to the certification is rather that I was never running after the certifications. So certification was never the aim for me. I got chartered just about a year ago, last summer, but the aim was not to get the certificate. It's the knowledge, because I had to prepare myself. I've learned from others as well through the assessment days. The people I know, that's also very important. And basically the challenge for myself. So I think it's not just the knowledge what you are gaining from these lifelong learnings and following the ethical guidelines, is that you learn from yourself. So you commit yourself to challenges and learn something more. And honestly, CIPR has great resources to do that.
Philippe?
What was your question again? Because we've covered so many topics in there in the answer of Andras. That...
So basically, I was saying why is it important now to improve body of knowledge around PR and communications, ethics, and also the certifications. Why?
Yeah, for me, it also starts with a huge responsibility everyone has working in this field. I think sometimes we underestimate the importance of our actions, of what we do, the impact that we have on people, on their decisions. And if you're in a more commercial sector, then it's about the way that they buy or perceive a brand or whatever. In my sector, it's changing behaviors. So it's a huge responsibility to be working in communications and public relations. And if you have that responsibility and you want to do your job seriously, again, there is a code of ethics that you need to follow. There is training that you need to, just like any other serious profession, where you need to continuously update yourself, see what's happening, and invest in yourself, and connect with other peers as well, because otherwise we tend to be in our little corner and do our thing. And one other topic that for the last year and through IPRA, I've been hammering on that. Yes, we have creative tasks in our profession, but communications is based on science. And that is something that I have a feeling that we've lost a little bit. And I think we need to return to building bridges with our academic colleagues again, because what we do, if we want to do it well, it's based on research, it's based on science. And yes, there is this creative part of what we do, which is fun to do. But if it's not based on science, on behavioral insights, on what happens in society, in my job, it's even based on what my colleague who is an anthropologist tells me. So that is an important fact. And I think if we take these things together, a sound ethical foundation, investing in science and science-based insights, and then professional development, we have three big pillars I think we can work with. But to me personally, then that means it, and I try to push that as well with the board members of IPRA and with our colleagues across the globe. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Just to summarize, I think in the last 12 to 14 months, we've also seen, even with the pandemic, how important PR and communication professionals are, even to sit on the table, basically to make decisions that affect their organizations. So I agree with you. And just to summarize what both of you have spoken about, that it's about the learning, investing in yourself, making sure that you're up to date to do the work that you've been called to do, is also being able to focus on what drives the profession. Philippe, you mentioned the science of communications, and I totally agree that it should also start thinking around a data-driven culture, wherever that data is coming from, basically for our profession, and the ethics and the standards. And I really want both of you to talk more about this ethics. It's a very interesting conversation on its own. So thank you for that. And just to
sorry, Ukwori, just one thing to echo what Philippe has said is, I think the science has like 2 dimensions. One is the science of our profession. So what we learn from other peers, what we learn from the trainers, the university courses, but also our relation as a profession to the science in terms of the climate change, in terms of the vaccination and the misinformation, because that has the huge responsibility. And that leads back to my original point 1, is the credibility or authenticity. If we are just doing communication for its own sake and not for the better, and not for the good, then we're just missing the point, missing the mission of our profession. So I think that it's also very key to everything we do should be based on fact, and the aim should definitely not to mislead or provide misinformation or disinformation. And that's where science comes in a different form.
Thank you for adding that. Thanks for adding. So I just wanted to bring it back to a more practical, conversation. How has this been done in different countries? Both of you are lead professional associations, and what are the benefits you've seen these associations have had on communications professionals, and how have they supported this legitimacy of this profession, basically? Andras, you can go first.
It's not a game, or it should not be a game of who's going first. But I think my biggest take would be on accountability. So I think probably one of the biggest benefits I had throughout being a member of different associations, and also leaders in a way in different associations, is the accountability. Is that you sign for the code of conduct. And the code of conduct doesn't just mean that when you join the association is that you sign that you abide to, but also there are processes that if there is an ethical misconduct or unethical behavior, then there is a process how you can be fined, how you can be expelled from this association, and that has a power as well. But also, like more practical stuff than that, you are registered, so everyone can find you. That means that you belong to a community. With the CIPR, there are 2 more levels: the accredited and the chartered status, which is an obvious benefit, and it's probably, as far as I know, that's the only one over the globe. What CIPR can provide, the accredited and the chartered status. So that's also a benefit, besides all the training opportunities and learning opportunities and the networking opportunities as well.
Thank you. Philippe, do you have anything to add?
No, I think what is important is that we take up our role as associations, and we all have a bit our not our specialty, but our first of all where we started out and what the scope was. I think it's incredibly powerful that the associations first of all work together. I think we've a bit passed, and Andras, again, tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm pretty new to the presidency, but I'm still a member of the EACD, which is a European-focused association, and then IPRA as president. But I think we've seen that we can easily work together, open doors, build bridges, because at the end of the day, that's who we are. What we do as professionals is building bridges and opening doors and bringing people in contact. And to me, that is the biggest role of associations, that if you're part of an association, that you're part of a group of professionals And that is so important today because, first of all, you could be working in your very small geographical area, but you know that other colleagues are just a call away or an email away or a visit to the integrated social platform away. But it is so powerful. I mean, having worked in countries like Liberia, Sierra Leone, and just a big hat off and enormous respect for the public communicators there, previously with other epidemics and now with the pandemic. I know what the resources are there on the ground. I see how they face pandemics and epidemics like we do here, maybe in Europe, but they do that with a minimum of resources and sometimes really only lifeline. They can call, they can ask for resources, be it a template, be it a connection, be it a tool, be whatever, because they're part of a bigger association. I think that's the power of associations. That we have this next to the fact what Andras said, that you have an ethical code, there's procedures in place, and we can at least tell those colleagues who do not follow the code, that this is not correct, that we can expel them, that we can point them out to the general public, because that is a function which is important. And personally, I think we need to do that more. There's a lot of work to be done on that scale. But that is definitely important. And the role of associations, again, for me, is bringing professionals together. It's incredibly powerful when what you are doing now, I mean, you're bringing so many people together from the African continent and outside of the African continent, because that is your role, and that's what you've put up as an objective. CIPR is doing that with events and training and summits. IPRA is running monthly free webinars for our international members and for non-members, because it's about connecting people. Imagine that there wouldn't be associations and we have to figure that all out by ourselves. I think that's the main power of associations. Yeah.
And also let me add a couple of thoughts, because I'm wearing different hats, because I'm not just the chair of CIPR International, as said, but the president of the Hungarian PR Association. So I'm seeing the whole context from a different angle, from a very small and tiny associations, where we have members, both individuals, agencies, and corporate in-house teams as well. And what Philippe has said was one of the main reasons why we had partnerships and signed partnerships with IPRA, for example, 5-6 years ago, and the CIPR, is to learn from each other. And there are two big global associations which are connecting local national associations. One is the Global Alliance, and the other one is the ECO, more for agency people. And their aim is to support the local associations with knowledge, with network, with content, lots of content, and also with very practical information. So one of the reasons why we wanted to join international associations is because we wanted to learn how others are doing. And 4 or 5 years ago, I was attending the Ugandan PR Association PRAU's AGM on behalf of the CIPR, and it was a great lesson for me, because we have members from all over. I mean, CIPR International has members from all over Africa. I think from like 10, 15 countries, and I wouldn't be able to serve those members. I wouldn't be able to support those members if I don't know them, if I'm not meeting them, if I'm not inviting them to as speakers. Hence our collaboration with Africa Communication Week, and we had already done 4 or 5 webinars which are available on demand as well. One of them was with Philippe a couple of weeks ago on crisis communication. So again, the learning from each other and the networking is also a very key part of these associations.
I totally agree, and I'm just here nodding my head, because my big introduction to associations was last year. Apart from being a member of Africa Communications Week, I accessed resources from the International Association of Business Communicators while working on crisis comms for COVID-19. And I think that was what really spurred me into rethinking my contributions and wanting to be part of an association. And it's been amazing since then. The networking kind of putting me on my toes in terms of what I know and what I need to learn. But I agree with Philippe. The big thing is that, and this is a question I want to throw out in terms of accountability. So we see a lot of associations for different professions, or, kind of regulatory, the regulatory functions that they play. Where do you think we are in terms of, the PR and communications profession? Because Philippe, you're saying, if a member doesn't abide by a code of ethics or code of conduct, there are repercussions, but how is that really enforced? Because we're thinking about, making this very professional, right? And saying that we're, people would look at our profession and hold them to the utmost standard in terms of practice. So what are the challenges? What are the gaps here? And in turn, in terms of, I like to think about the challenges and the gaps, but the opportunities we have moving forward.
Can I you mentioned that you were accessing resources as a professional during the pandemic. I think it's a very strong example of when associations come together, what we can do. I mean, we automatically connected CIPR, IPRA, many other associations, PRSA, when this came up, this pandemic. And we said, look, volunteers, who's a volunteer to give, and these are senior consultants like, Andras and myself and others who normally invoice by the hour or by the day at least. Who wants to volunteer and give away these hours of consulting pro deo for any other colleague who has an issue and is fighting for information and fighting this thing? I mean, that was done in a week, and boom, it was there. And we've delivered, I don't know how many hours of free consulting to colleagues who were in need. So that is very powerful. And I think, Andras, you mentioned, you said climate change. I take the Guardian principle on there. I call it climate crisis as from today or from a couple of months ago, when the Guardian decided not to call it change, but crisis. Imagine what we can do together if we sit around the table, and there are initiatives around that. Imagine what we can do for other societal issues if we can do that, and we should be doing that. Now, on your question then, that it's as you said, there are gaps, but there are opportunities. To give you an idea, you don't need, you need, if you want to move to the next step, which is telling people that they're not following the ethical code, and then what would follow as maybe expulsion or what have you. But I'm in a Facebook group with a couple of communication professionals, and we're all member of different associations. It's not association run, it's simply we know each other and we connect on Facebook. And we had a whole discussion a couple of days ago where simply by one of the colleagues pointing out something which was totally unethical, run by a small PR agency in the UK, had a full discussion going on, and where in fact we decided what we potentially could do. And because in the UK, and because maybe some memberships, we could point that out to the board of that association and say, your member is definitely not following any kind of ethical code. What are you going to do about it? So there's this professional, let's say, social system in place where those who follow the ethics can point out others and say, can you please look at it? And then I'll turn to Andras, because they've got a strong procedure behind, having these ethical things, because every time we talk about ethics, I mean, we do turn to CIPR and the procedures they have in place, because it's very well done. And also because there were a couple of, let's face it, high profile cases over the last years, but and I'm not saying from members, but in the UK, I mean. So, but it is, as you said, it is an opportunity as well, because it does elevate the standard. And without that, you know, it's very difficult to be perceived as very professional if you have a couple of what I call cowboys running around and doing communications as they think they can do.
Yeah, let me just reflect on the ethical part, and then I'll bring one additional thought to this. On the ethical part with regards to CIPR, there are two very great examples. One is that if you want, I mean, you can reach two status within the CIPR, and that's unique for CIPR. One is the accredited status. When you do CPDs, which is a 12-month period, and you collect 60 points for what you do for your professional learning and lifelong learning. Then after 2 years of completing, 2 consecutive years of completing the CPDs, you will automatically become accredited. But part of the CPD mandatory scores, there is an ethical element. So if you don't do an ethical training, reading an article, listening to a conversation, then you won't get your CPD score accredited. So that's a very important one. Its next level is after 3 consecutive years of being accredited practitioners, you can go for the Chartership Assessment. And the Chartership Assessment has like 3 main pillars: the leadership, the strategy, and the ethics. And to me, because I've done it last year, to me, the best experience was not that it was an exam, but it was a conversation. And the preparation was the longest part of the assessment. It's a one full day program, but I need to prepare for months to just reflect on my experiences, what I've done good, what I've done wrong, and how I will change my profession. And throughout the assessment days, we had conversations and we talked to each other and we shared experiences. So that's with regards to that part. And the additional one, which is kind of like the gaps which you mentioned, is I think that PR professionals tends to say, and it's probably an ongoing issue, that we say that the reputation of our profession is always very bad. And I think that 2 like main issues happened last year: the climate change as it turned to climate crisis, according to Philippe. So that's one thing, and probably the pandemic was a big influence, has a big influence on that. Is that for ages, for decades, we PR professionals had to make the board understand the importance of the 2-way communication, understanding our stakeholders, managing all different stakeholders, while because of the pandemic, everyone turned into the crisis situation immediately. Then all leaders, corporate leaders, had to learn that this is part of their operation. This is not an additional stuff. This is part of their operation. And I think that there was a great help for PR professionals, that the corporate leaders understood the importance and also the responsibility of our profession. And I think the role of the PR associations and PR organizations is to emphasize this importance, to emphasize this responsibility of our profession. And that's something we can work on. I mean, we are in a good position, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Thank you for mentioning that. And it's also a realization that there is a really big opportunity to continue to raise that profile of the profession at this point in time, where everybody is realizing the importance of the profession in this time. So are there any last words, Andras and Philippe, before we go into Q&A from the audience?
Well, Ukwori, what you said is there is definitely an opportunity, and I completely agree. I've never seen the attention or the importance of communications so high on the agenda. I'm very happy, by the way, for our internal communications colleagues who now are on top of the agenda, which is a good thing, because poor colleagues. But there are enormous challenges as well. I mean, we need to accept as well that we are one of the professions, industries which have been very, very, very slow in first understanding and then adopting internet and technology. I mean, some of our colleagues still don't understand how things are working. We are very slow. If you compare us to our marketing cousins, we are way behind. We need to acknowledge that. We need to invest in that. We need to start understanding what is happening. To come back to my previous point, if we do not pretty urgently learn from our science colleagues, our academic colleagues, what we've done wrong during this pandemic, and the cases are known, it wasn't all very well organized from a communications point of view, and that's even an understatement, then again, we will not achieve that position that we all crave. And then there's a third one, which I think is crucial. And I know, Andras, I mean, we're aligned on this, because otherwise we wouldn't be a member of the associations we're a member of. But I just sat on a jury of an award scheme, and you were mentioning awards. Half of those case studies still add AVEs in there, add value equivalent. If that doesn't change, and we've been talking about this, to end these things for years and years, but if it doesn't happen this year, I don't know where we're going to get. Because if you go to a senior business manager and you come with that kind of metric, not really. You don't get any credibility. And so, to me, those 3 points and some others, but those are really crucial. If we don't change that together as associations, as professionals, we're going to lose that opportunity that we've been given.
Indeed, I would echo to that, yes, obviously. And I also would emphasize the importance of technology for one of the reasons is what Philippe has mentioned, but the other reason where we started our conversation is the responsibility that we're using these tools. So I think that our profession is basically to drive conversations between all stakeholders, but with those tools, if you use them in a wrong way, then we could manipulate as well. And that's also an important part of our professionalism, is how ethical we use this technology, because we have to fight against misinformation, the disinformation, and also the ethical challenges of using the technology, for example, the deepfakes. If we use technology quite well, then we can make big mistakes, not only because of our credibility, but because we can turn conversations, we can turn the stories, we can turn the narratives of products, of thoughts, of ideas, governments, healthcare systems into a very bad direction. So I would encourage ourselves to collaborate on this, because the need of the technology knowledge is key, but then the second one is as important, to use the technology in an ethical way.
Thank you, Andras and Philippe, for those interesting thoughts, and it's also making me to think quite a bit. But Philippe, I wanted to probe just a little bit. You quickly rushed talking about PR awards. And I wanted you to give a little bit more context. Are you saying, it should be changed in terms of structure, or is it that it's not adding the value that it should add to the profession or to the association? I would like to be clearer on that.
Sorry, no, not at all. The awards are crucial as long as we have these systems in place which are aligned. And I was making a point about measurement and evaluation metrics. We have now globally accepted measurement and evaluation metrics that we know we can use, which are scientifically sound, and we should all agree on those. I mean, we are agreed on those, but still, I saw organizations, in their case study using these vanity metrics, which don't mean anything at all if you don't, anyway. But that is an issue that we need to work on. But the concept of awards is crucial, because we need case studies. It's only by having case studies in a certain format, that we can use these to compare, to learn, to use as case studies what they're supposed to be. It's not just getting the award, which is fine, and that's recognition, and that is important. But it's also getting the input of campaigns that worked. Why did they work? How were they measured? What were the tactics? And it's learning from those case studies. And that's why an award is very important. So don't get me wrong, awards are very important. In fact, my link to the awards and the measurement and evaluation part was about the question, we have an opportunity, but only if we really shoot down wrong metrics, those vanity metrics that really don't serve anyone.
Thank you.
Let me just share a fun example. Well, actually, it's a sad one, but it looked funny because I usually jury. I'm on a jury with several like local and international award schemes as well, because of my experience. And 2 years ago, when I became the president of the Hungarian PR Association, that was one of the first statements I made, that every award scheme we introduce or we continue, we will ban AVEs. Yeah. So all submissions or entries having AVEs as a metric we automatically ban. Now that was a big achievement that we not only achieved that with our award schemes, but also with the professionals one in Hungary. So every award scheme which is based in Hungary and has anything to do with the PR industry are banning AVEs. So that's a huge achievement. While the funny part is that I was on a jury of an international award for an association which is related to the ones who we get this ban from, this banning idea, and there were tons of entries with AVEs mentioned. So I was in a kind of challenging situation, what to do then, who is walking the talk. But the other thing is that, and we try it with our new award scheme, is that we are not only expecting PR campaigns in a way that these funny, very emotional, very kind of PR stunts, but we wanted to, where we created a new category for PR strategies. And those are not, the vanity campaigns. Those are the ones we could have a very strong metrics against business goals. And I think that's part of the association. Obviously, we are not expecting too many entries because that's not very popular and you cannot really talk about it. But that's part of our mission as a professional association to do that. And the other thing with award schemes is what Philippe has mentioned, is that we can learn from that. So professional associations should not just do awards for the revenues, setting a revenue stream. It really should focus on spreading the news of the good practices, spreading the news of the good campaigns, and drive conversations around them, because it's very, very important. And you can learn a lot from different cultures, from different approaches, from different usage of technology. So that's absolutely valid for the African continent as well. I've seen very, very good campaigns throughout Africa, which could be implemented. I mean, the approach, the idea can be implemented in other countries. We can learn from that as well. And also international award schemes. CIPR has introduced a global category for the Excellence Award. Just for its, that was the aim for that.
Thank you. Thanks for exploring the... No. It's really good and interesting. It's a very interesting conversation and very enlightening. And I'm sure the attendees feel the same way. But I'm going to move in the next 10 minutes to just focus on Q&A. And I would ask the attendees to ask their questions in the Q&A box. And we will take them and answer the ones we can answer in that time live. So I have a question here from Eva, and it says, one of the areas which interests me particularly is that in the CIPR Charter, Andras, I think this is for you, we must act in the public good. Could the panelists explore this a little? Is it always essential? Is it always possible? Should we say no to some clients? Or, as in the law, does everyone deserve defense? So I'll give that to you, Andras.
Yeah, that's a really challenging question, and I know Eva would have asked these questions because she's a past president of CIPR International, and she's my mentor. And my answer would be for that, and I'm sure that she didn't ask this for promotion, but we organized a webinar on this this very topic. So if anyone's interested, then you can search for on YouTube our CIPR Chartered Institute of Public Relations channel, and we have a playlist for international context, and we did just the same because I think it's a very important like professional challenge. To me, it's always the three questions: who do you work for, what do you work, and how do you work? So would you work for a government which is, you know, undemocratic in any way? That's ethical challenge one. Then would you work for those governments or for that client if the work is something which is good for the nature, which is good for the society, which is good for the climate crisis? Would you work for that? I mean, can you make a difference whether who you work for and what do you work? And third, but as important, is how do you work? Do you do the work using you know, unethical tactics or challenges or channels or tools in any way? So I think that my answer would be around like three different layers. One is your personal layer. And there are organizations, for example, we invited Tony Langham from Lansons. They have the right, their colleagues have the right to refuse to work for a client. That's a very high ethical standard. That's on a personal level. Then the second level is to abide with professional conduct, code of conduct. So if you're a member of an association, then you have to follow the professional guidelines. And third is probably a most soft answer from me, but it's because it's based on conversations. So I think that ethics, the ethical challenges are changing all the time, and we as professionals need to talk about them all the time. As members of the associations, as professionals on Facebook groups like Philippe did with peers and friends. So that's part of our roles, because we learn from each other. We learn the different challenges. One good example, we wanted to cover Africa and the African continent with CIPR International. And first we invited Robin de Villiers from South Africa, from BCW, to the House of Lords, to one of our events, to talk about the different ethics, the different approaches to ethics, because we wanted, I mean, in the UK, we wanted to understand what is going on and how is it going in Africa. So that's part of the conversation which we're having.
I think it's this is something that will be debated for the next, you know, centuries, because I mean, ethics, and then I like the question about, you know, first of all, the common good, and then it also said, does everyone deserve defense? Okay, if you subscribe to an association which in its charter says that communications should be done for the common good, can you work for the fossil fuel industry? Personally, I don't think so. But again, what do? How far can you go in those things? When I started out in public relations, I started with Porto Novelli. And it was, at the time, a small agency well, it's an international agency, but the office in Brussels was very small. And right from the start, it grew from 7 people to 45 people in 3 years' time. And right from the start, as a consultant, you always had the choice to refuse to work for a client. And we had cases, and I also refused to work for a certain client. And in my team, I had an associate who reported to me, who refused to work for one of my clients. And you respect that. But then there's a higher level. Who do you take on as a client, for instance, as a solo consultant? I would, you know, any kind of fossil fuel company I don't work for by definition, because I don't think it's aligned with the climate crisis that we have now. Do they have the right to be defended? Sure, as long as it follows ethical guidelines, it's based on transparent information and not manipulation, etc., etc. So it's not black and white, these discussions. You always have to go and look. And I would be the first ones to say they are entitled to defense from a public relations professional. Definitely, it's fundamental, but needs to be based on our ethical codes that we agreed upon, not on manipulation, not on framing, not on. So it is a difficult discussion. It's also, I think, a discussion that as associations, we really need to have together on a continuous basis, because these will change. Some cases are black and white, I mean, but others are not as simple as saying, oh, you're wrong, you're right. That's not what ethics are about. It's not saying you're wrong, you're right. It's about having discussions and seeing where you go, taking a common basis that all agree upon. And that's always difficult.
Thank you for those answers to Eva's questions. Are there any other questions from the attendees? Because I can't see any.
Yeah, maybe they are in the chat room.
No, none. I'm also monitoring the chat. I mean, there's some comments, Andras and Philippe, I would say you should go through in the Q&A. And okay, I've gotten a question from Ella. To Philippe, the net zero will be mostly driven by the large energy companies, that's the multinationals. The research and innovation required by the energy transition are enormous in terms of the financial aid and technical requirements. Today, without the fossil fuels industry, we wouldn't use Zoom, we wouldn't have ambulance, and wouldn't have ventilators. Ella, can you let us know what the question is, or is this more of a comment? Sounds more like a comment. Okay.
Yeah, to me, it was more like a challenge for Philippe, saying that he wouldn't work for a fossil fuel company. But I have a, you're muted. Philippe, you're muted. Philippe, you're muted. Oh. He's probably just saying the best words throughout the conference when we just couldn't hear.
Sorry.
Yeah,
no, I would gladly take on that challenge, because it is, of course, you can come up with the natural facts. Of course, we wouldn't have a Zoom thing with fossil fuel. I'm talking about the ethical way of knowing for 30 years that there is an issue with what you're doing as a core business and not talking about it. And it's still today framing that discourse in a totally different way. That's what I was mentioning. Of course, we have to live with legacy systems. That's how history works. But it's about what we do today and what has been going on for the last 30 days within that industry that is not really ethical to me. So I don't know if that was an answer, but we can have a full debate on that, of course.
Yeah, I have a very great example, but I'll be very short because I know we're running out of time. That's the challenge of the 3 layers, which I mentioned. I was invited to work for an oil company, a big oil company in Central Eastern Europe. Okay, would you work for that or not? Okay, my answer was at that time, 12 years ago, that yes, let's see what the work was. The work was about renewable energy. So just as Ella mentioned, it was about helping them into the right direction. So the second answer was, okay, obviously, this is a good topic. We could work on that. But then we ended up coming up with a strategy with very good arguments. And at one point, one of the consultants, internal consultants, asked me to do third-party communication, meaning astroturfing, creating NGOs for spreading the information, which is beneficial for the company. Now that's the 3rd layer. I wouldn't do that. So the first, who do you work for? What do you work for? And how do you work for? So you have all these ethical challenges. And my short answer for Ella is definitely yes. So we need to help them going to a right direction.
Thank you, Andras and Philippe, for this wonderful conversation. I really learned a lot, and I'm really have taken away a couple things about the opportunities PR and communications profession has, whether it's in learning from the science and understanding the science and using data. Andras, I love the way that you brought in the ethical use of technology, because even though everything is advancing, there's a lot of misinformation and deep fakes, but also there's an opportunity with AI as well. And you keep mentioning responsibility that we have as professionals, and that needs to be a conversation that needs to happen. And we've had a full-blown conversation on ethics, and I know that this is something that should be continued. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to the attendees as well for engaging with us this evening, and have a good evening.
Sorry, just one last thing, because my colleagues will just kill me if I don't mention that we have a code. So if you're interested in joining the CIPR, we have a code for reduced price. So just reach out to me and I will just share the code with you.
Thank you, Africa Communications Week, too, for these wonderful sessions. We are really, really grateful to have this platform and opportunity to all come together and discuss. So thank you again, and bye.
Thank you.
Corey.
Happy Africa Day.